All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Mark Ghilarducci. I'm Governor Brown's Director of the Office of Emergency Services. First of all, let me say that we remain heartbroken for everyone who has been impacted by this terrible fire. You are all the reasons why we are working night and day here in the community and at the State Operations Center, and working closely with our federal partners who are now fully engaged with us. We're moving fast on all of this. First with the tremendous response, great work by all of the firefighters in CAL FIRE, into now the recovery process as we're starting to work with local communities to frame that up. Within days of the fire itself, the governor was able to secure federal disaster assistance, and the president did declare a major disaster declaration. And we do appreciate all the work FEMA has done and the work from the White House on that. That will be very important as we move forward. We know dozens have lost their lives so far, and there are still individuals unaccounted for. This will remain a priority for all of us. This is not going to be an easy task, but the operations will be thorough and exhaustive, and will take the time, and you will need to know that we're doing everything we can at the state and federal level with our other partners in local government throughout the state and with organizations from throughout the country, actually. We're going to continue to support all those who have been evacuated, and we'll support the town of Paradise and Butte County in that recovery process. The governor has ordered all state agencies and personnel necessary to respond to this event to meet whatever requirements are necessary. And mutual aid has been deployed from throughout the state of California and the western United States. Literally thousands of firefighters, law enforcement, highway patrol, the California National Guard, medical and health, volunteers, all from throughout the western U.S. Have been committed here. The response has been enormous, and the overall recovery will be enormous as well. Working together with our local authorities, we're going to open up a local assistance center here in the next couple of days, which will allow individuals who've been impacted by this event to come in. And actually right now, individuals who have been impacted can register for disaster assistance through FEMA, and you'll be getting that number shortly. We're going to continue to work with our local partners in setting up a plan for the recovery process. This is an issue where it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it is something that we're going to work together to rebuild and make it better. So with that, we have a few folks that will come and give you a briefing today. Let me start off by introducing the Director of the California Department of Forestry and Fire, CAL FIRE Director Ken Pemlock. Chief Pemlock.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. So we continue to have dry weather conditions, critical fire weather across California well into the next several days and for the next week. And while the winds are subsiding for the most part, particularly Southern California tonight and into tomorrow morning, vegetation is critically dry. We will still have conditions that will produce new and potentially damaging fires. And so we're not keeping our eye off this ball at all. I know there's some rain in the forecast. I think we will worry about that when it comes. Right now we are focused on maintaining the pace and the battle rhythm of this firefight across the state to ensure we have all the resources that we need and that we have them in the right places. This morning there are over 9,000 firefighters spread out across California engaged in the firefight. Numerous resources, as Director Ghilarducci said, from across the country as well as California. The camp fire this morning is 135,000 acres and 35% contained. We just had a very good briefing. Progress is being made. Obviously a very challenging fire, but progress is being made, and we have the utmost confidence in all the folks in this incident that are supporting it, that they will get the job done. Southern California, we continue to watch the Woolsey fire in Ventura and Los Angeles County. It's over 97,000 acres this morning, but at 47% contained. Good progress being made there as well. and we continue to move resources and put them in the places where they need to be to get this job done. But I want to just reiterate that we continue to have a lot of work to do. We will continue to be here. We will get this done until the job is over. And we continue to work on transitioning into the recovery and all the other work that needs to get done. It's a challenge, and this fire now becoming the most destructive and the most deadly fire in the state history. Our thoughts, as Director Ghilarducci said, are with everyone. We are all affected by this. We will continue to engage and support you all in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And now I'd like to introduce Brock Long, the Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Thanks, Mark. Unfortunately, everything that I've seen, this is just truly devastating and heartbreaking. It's one of the worst disasters that I've seen in my career, hands down. Bottom line is, about an hour ago, President Trump spoke with both me and Secretary Zinke with the Department of Interior, and his message is to take care of people, and that's exactly what we're here to do. A couple things that I also want to point out is that the first responders in these towns, the sheriffs, the police departments, the firefighters, CAL FIRE to the Interior, these guys are the real heroes. They've been doing some heroic work with the evacuations and continuing to fight those fires, and I cannot thank them enough. Our goal at FEMA is to support Governor Brown with achieving his response and recovery goals. And being on the ground yesterday in Malibu, as well as the Santa Monica Mountains in both Ventura and Los Angeles counties, and now here today, I want to make sure that there's, we're bringing to bear everything that we can from the federal resources to help Californians overcome this time. Right now, the focus is obviously life safety and life sustainment and mass care. That's what we're here to help provide support through Mark Ghilarducci and his staff and the local governments. But also we want to make sure that people understand that if they've been impacted, individual assistance has been turned on as a result of the President signing the Major Disaster Declaration. And you can call 1-800-621-FEMA, or you can visit disasterassistance.gov. Again, 1-800-621-FEMA or disasterassistance.gov. The first phone call that every citizen should make is to their insurance provider. Insurance is the first line of defense. And then if you're not insured or underinsured, feel free to reach out to FEMA at 1-800-621-FEMA or disasterassistance.gov. With that, we also have several FEMA and federal government employees on the ground here to all start helping our mayors and local municipal governments to navigate a very long and complex recovery. So this is going to be extremely difficult. When you have total losses like Paradise, you have to concentrate on helping communities bring back the infrastructure. Without the infrastructure, you can't rebuild businesses, and you can't support those who have homes left or those that with temporary homes. We're also working with Mark and the state to understand what we call transitional shelter assistance to get people into hotels or rental properties that may be available. But the most important thing that others can do that have not been impacted by this event is figure out ways to help. Donate money to InvoAd, find out, nonprofits that are engaged here, volunteer organizations that are active in disaster. If you want to find out how to help, go to invoad.org, nvoad.org, or reach out to local volunteer groups who are also here on the ground taking care of people. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Brock. We appreciate you being here. Okay, now I'd like to introduce the Governor of the State of California, Governor Jerry Brown.
Yeah, this is so devastating that I don't really have the words to describe it. It looks like a war zone. It is. It's the devastation that only fires of this kind could bring about. Nobody's really expecting it, but it happens. And when it happens, people do pull together, and I'm really impressed with how much this community is pulling together. Certainly the first responders, the firefighters, the sheriffs, the police, everyone else like that, but also neighbors and just people helping one another. This does bring us together. We can't avoid a catastrophe, but we can prepare for it, we can recover from it, and we will. I'm issuing an executive order today that will speed up recovery, cut red tape, overcome some regulations and other kind of laws that get in our way, because we have to clean up the debris, bind up our wounds, and get with tomorrow. We're in a different kind of world. We know that. There are many elements to this. What causes these kind of catastrophes, where people live and how they live, and the structures, and the changing of the climate, and the winds, and the dryness, and all the rest of it, and the continuing drought. So we're in for very difficult times. This will never be the same, but I can assure you that everyone in California is going to do their best. President Trump did call me just a few minutes ago, and he's pledged the full resources of the federal government. And I can tell you, California stands in the same position. We do have the funds, and we will help out in every way we can, realizing that we have issues in Southern California, and we will have problems in the years to come. So I think now is the time for solidarity and understanding, and let's learn how to do this together in the best way we can, and get ready, because we're always under some kind of threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Now I'd like to introduce the Secretary of the U.S. Department of the Interior, Secretary Ryan Zinke. Secretary.
This is my fourth trip to California. Unfortunately, every trip this year has been forest fires, and each trip I say this is the worst fire I've seen, and now we're here today, and this is the worst fire I have seen. This is from a kid who grew up in Montana. I've seen fires across the West, but this is a level of devastation, and certainly the community. I'd just like to say thank you to our firefighters. And we forget, especially local firefighters, is that they're out in the front line, and their homes, their families are in jeopardy, and yet they hold the line. And at every fire I've been to in California, I can tell you a magnificent, heroic, courageous effort by our firefighters, our law enforcement, our first responders, and thanks. As the governor said, there's a lot of reasons for a fire. Now is really not the time to point fingers. Now the time is to look at the infrastructure, make sure we have accountability of who's out there that's unaccounted for, deal with the families, make sure they have what they need, make sure that in Department of Interior works as we do, works with our CAL FIRE, and now I know Ken and Scott by name. I know the Commanding General, the Adjutant General, and it is time for America to stand together. We all share the same grief, and we're going to make sure that within our power that it's not going to happen again, but we have to work together to do it. There's a lot of reasons why these catastrophic fires are happening, but certainly we're very clever as Americans, and we need to pull together and do everything within our power to make sure that these communities like Whiskeytown, like Yosemite, like Paradise, don't get devastated, because it really is a devastating tragedy. And as the governor said, it's hard to describe words until you visit, and you visit with the victims and the victims' families, and see the smaller, great communities become really a charred image of what they once were. So thank you very much. We'll take questions if you have, and I do ask that you just identify who you are and where you work from, and I'm sure the team of professionals behind me can answer a lot of the details.
Great, thanks, Secretary. Yeah.
Hi, question for Governor Brown. Should state operations pay more attention to evacuation
What?
planning? Given what's happened here, states like Florida have hurricane planning, California is doing more on that front to make sure that people can evacuate safely.
Well, Paradise had done a lot of pre-planning for just this kind of an emergency, but the fire, of course, was unprecedented, overwhelming, and so a lot of people got caught. Yeah, we need to prepare more. We need to do a lot of things. there's so many needs and so many issues that we talk about, particularly in government and in the political world, but certainly public safety, emergency preparation, prevention, all that. So, yeah, I think we have to take a long pause and think of just what happened here, what can we do better, and that will involve not one or two things, but many, many things. So, yeah, I think your point is well taken, and those in Florida and Texas that have suffered from hurricanes differently. But the natural world is the power, and we create a lot of comfort and a lot of security, but at the end of the day, we are physical beings in a biological world buffeted by physical forces. And we have to understand those forces, and we have to so conduct our lives and shape our structures and activities that we fit in with nature instead of trying to fight it.
Follow-up, Governor Brown.
Yeah.
Secretary Zinke has raised questions in the past about California's fire management, including
Yeah.
lawsuits by environmentalists, making it more difficult.
Yeah.
Clear deadwood. Do you have any thoughts on that, and whether that's a serious issue making you fire worse?
No, I don't have a lot of thoughts on that.
Your boss, the president, has said that California poorly manages forests, said that we need to do something about better use of withdraw federal funds. We've just crossed the 1.6 million acres, and here's my point. About half those acres are federal forest land. So if we're doing such a poor job, why would he threaten to cut funds off to the state of California, when in fact half of this acreage is gone, is your acreage for which you are personally responsible?
Well, as Governor Brown has said, there's a lot of reasons for fire, why we're here. Some is the fire seasons have gotten longer, the temperatures have gotten hotter, the amount of material, the dead and dying timber is elevated. You have the mortality rate of the beetle kill. If you look at a map of Yosemite and you look at the dead and dying timber in Yosemite, I've spent a lot of time in Yosemite. So I don't want to finger point. What I want to do is how we go from here. As you look at what's happening in Yosemite Park, we are doing prescribed burns late in season. We're collecting timber. We're removing dead and dying timber. We brought our best scientists and look at best practices. That's important. The president has pledged full support to California, but you are right. This is just not a state issue. It's not a federal issue. This is an American issue of managing our forests. We all want healthy forests. And excuse me, and the reason why a lot of people live in California is because California is a really great place to live, and we like going out in the summer and recreating and fishing and hiking. What people don't want to do is they don't want to evacuate their homes and watch communities get devastated. So we're going to all have to work together in order to find solutions to this, and it's a variable. A lot of variables in this problem is that active forest management, working together with the states, making sure that adjacent properties work better together so we manage ecosystems and landscapes rather than isolated assets. And if you live next to a Forest Service property, Department of Interior property, you should have some certainty it's well managed. And the only way you can manage it is we have to work with the state too. And so the governor and I we talk all the time. This is not the first time we've talked, and we do get along very well, and we work together for the benefit of the people, which is exactly what the governor and I do.
Governor, hey, Gianna Triboni from Vice on HBO.
What, say it again?
Gianna Triboni from Vice on HBO.
That's, what were those acronyms? I didn't follow them.
Sorry, from Vice on HBO. We're a
Oh,
documentary program.
oh, your documentary program.
Yeah.
I knew you were a little different, but
I guess just firstly, how do we curb these wildfires? Each year they're breaking records set by the ones before, more destructive, more deadly. And secondly,
how do you curb them?
how do we curb them? What can we do? And secondly, we know the NorCal fires were, PG&E was held responsible. I talked to folks earlier today who said they're already filing lawsuits. People yesterday who were saying we received warnings from them that our power was going to be turned off the day before the fire started, and our power wasn't turned off. People are very upset. So I guess my question is PG&E being held responsible, is PG&E being held accountable, just in general, not for this fire? I know results haven't been released. Is CPUC holding them accountable? Are you holding them accountable? And are they appropriately and responsibly operating?
Well, you asked a lot of questions, and so I would say, how do we curb forest fires? We've had fires for long before the Europeans showed up here, and our indigenous people had a different way of living with nature. For 10,000 years, there was never more than 300,000. Now we have 40 million, and we have a totally different situation. So it's not one thing. It's people, it's how people live, it's where they live, and it's the changing climate, the drought, the lack of diminishing moisture, and all the rest of the things we've talked about. And the truth is, and I don't want to be giving any happy time news, we're going to have more difficulties. Things are not going to get better. They're going to get more challenging because of the continuing alteration in the climate, lack of moisture, early snow melt, and faster winds, the whole thing. So the issue here is not pointing a bunch of fingers. It's first being very clear, crystal clear about what is going on, what do we face, and how do we get out of it. There'll be plenty of time for accountability, but at the end of the day, it's us that have to deal with it. So there is no other over there, because at the end of the day, it's the federal government, which our taxpayers provide, it's the state government, which our taxpayers provide, or it's the utility users that put up a lot of the money, or it's some shareholders. So we will work it through as best we can, but make no doubt about it, this is not a neat, nice, simple proposition. It's messy, it's complicated, and I'm afraid it's going to get more difficult in the years ahead. Yeah.
For Secretary Zinke, follow-up question. Dale Casper, Sacramento Bee.
Hi. It's good to see you again.
Likewise. Regarding the president's tweets from a few days ago, was the president wrong? To single out California, to blame California for management?
Well, certainly California has had, the four biggest fires. And as the governor points out, there's a lot of people in California. As Interior, I got a bill for about $870 million this year. And that was just to repair infrastructure, repair watersheds. That didn't include fighting the forest fires. So this is a national issue. And certainly California being an economic powerhouse, very populous and influential state, when something of this nature happens to California, then people pay attention. Certainly people paid attention last year in Montecito. For the first time you heard maybe we should manage our forests a little more. Because if you burn them down to the scale that we are, and you had the landslides, loss of life in Montecito, I think there was just around 20 people. This is much higher. So what are we going to do? We have to work together to manage our forests, looking at health, return the health of the forests. It starts with working together for common solutions, because this is unsustainable. And the loss of life, and now people are in shock because they have lost their homes, but they've lost their lives. A lot of people did get out, fortunately. But this is unacceptable year after year after year after year, season after season, these catastrophic scales. It used to be a 5,000 acre fire was a big deal. This year we've had the Carr fire, last year the Thomas fire, the Montecito fire, this fire, the one down in Los Angeles. These are huge, huge fires. And I got to tell you, the backside of it is you got to repair the riparian banks. A lot of these fires are going to go areas that were previously mined. So you're going to have runoff that's going to have hazardous materials. You're going to have hazardous material runoffs from Paradise. That's going to go in the watershed. You have a dam that's sitting there, and this is where the federal government and the state government have to work together to address these things. Now, we are in recovery stage, and we're still fighting forest fires out there. There's still an active fire. We're still looking for people to make sure we have the number of accountability of who's lost. There's a lot going on, but as we go forward, we're going to have to face the rainy seasons coming. That's going to set a new set of challenges for us, so you don't have the Montecito issues in there. And the only way to do it is Americans, as Americans, have to step up. We're not finger pointing here. We're all in the same boat. Everyone loves California. I certainly do. I want to see California thrive. I want to see healthy forests, and I want to go and have a steak dinner when the governor retires.
I was with you on the tarmac and Reading at the fire ops page during the car fire press conference. And could you elaborate on what you mean by better forest management practices? We've heard a lot about this, but from talking to people who are doing salvage logging or other small scale stuff, it doesn't seem to be economically feasible or sustainable for these companies to log. The trees are worthless. Small stuff that from a management practice you want to get out of there, they can't sell. What's the answer? How does this work? And please elaborate on what forest proper management practices.
Yeah. You go back, and how did we get here? It wasn't a year ago, it wasn't 2 years ago. This has been decades. Let's give the example here. You had a fire in 2008, still a lot of underbrush, and you're right. When you have a fire and you don't get salvage operations within the first year, then the timber is a diminishing asset. Then you're actually paying people to remove it rather than having some value. So we've not been able to do salvage timber to the degree we have. We should be doing prescribed burns late in the season rather than mid-season, controlled burns. We have an enormous amount of dead and dying timber. Some of it was beetle kill, some of it was drought. I think we have really good science. There are models that are better. You can shred trees when they have mortality, but the density of trees is up. The amount of dead and dying trees is elevated. The temperatures are hotter. The season's longer. We have seasonal problems with as far as number of personnel Interior can hire seasonally, because they're fighting forest fires so long that by the time they're done, they don't have enough man hours to do the prescribed burns. So some of this is administrative. And again, a lot of you look at Pinchot, you can go back, you look at the German model of the Black Forest. We have really good science, and it is better to use best science, best practices in order to have a regulatory framework that increases environmental stewardship, safety, and reliability, and predictability. So active forest management is a tool that we should use.
Question for FEMA, please.
Hold on a second, Mike. Bianca.
Hi, question
Okay.
for FEMA, Ms. Hall. As you know, most of our county is out of the house, and a lot of you are actually living in parking lots right now, in the Walmart one specifically. There's rain coming in. What are the immediate plans for housing?
Well, great question. So obviously, the first thing that we got to do is, with transitional shelter, is getting people out of shelters or providing enough mass care space. That's typically done at the local level in conjunction with the state and federally supported. And so we will work with Mark to make sure that you've got enough shelter capability, temporary shelter capability, but ultimately shelters are kind of a refuge of last resort. It's not an optimal situation, and we realize that. So we continuously work with our partners to also figure out what's available for rent. Hotels, motels, and these things take time to put into place. As far as the people in parking lots, I'm not aware of that, the situation, but Mark, do you want to add to that?
So one of our priorities is getting people now out of the shelters into something we call sort of interim. So the administrator's correct. That's going to be hotel availability. That's going to be rental properties. We're going to try to find as many rental properties in the area as possible. But the reality is that there are only a limited number of rental properties, so we may have to go out of the county or a little further out. We also know that, this is where families reside and people go to church and other kinds of things, so we want to try to keep them as local as possible. We're working with organizations like Airbnb and other kinds of organizations such as that to be able to get space for individuals over a longer period of time. And quite frankly, we're also looking now at the possibility of bringing in some sort of a travel trailer or some sort of a mobile home of some sort to be able to house folks. That takes a little bit more time. The first thing people need to do is register with FEMA and the number that the administrator provided, and get into the system, and then we'll get them placed as soon as we possibly can. We're also working closely with Red Cross and some other non-governmental organizations to ensure that any funds and any support for those individuals can be made available, and all of us are expanding to total extent all of those programs to make them immediately available. The short of it, though, is folks are going to stay in the shelters for a little bit longer until we can get through all that. And we've done a lot of wraparound services. We've got medical teams and other kinds of efforts in those shelters. And we're deeply appreciative of all the folks that have been running those shelters, and for the American Red Cross and the Salvation Army and all the volunteers that have been working there.
Can any of this be done by Wednesday with the rain coming in?
Well, there's some folks that are already in the process of getting assistance and getting placed. And I know that, there's no shortage of effort trying to get people out of those places. Look, we've tried to get people, we've talked to all the people in the parking lots. Many individuals are comfortable staying where they're at, and we don't want to push them into something that they don't want to be in. But our effort is to try to move as expeditiously as possible to get them out of that environment.
One thing, yeah, go ahead.
Just a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Mike Baricchi.
Yep.
Let him finish as well.
You mentioned about being out here trying to get relief for people.
Right.
For people that have no internet service, for people living in the
Right.
Walmart parking lot, how do they find you?
So-
Where are you going to be visible?
So let's talk about this. Bottom line is, this is a very complex disaster, probably one of the most complex the nation's ever seen when it comes to Paradise. And here's the thing. First of all, there's sensitivities around debris. You can't just remove the debris because we're still looking for missing persons. And it takes time to be able to go through, sift through the debris at the local level to make sure that we respect those that may, the remains that may be in place in some of these homes. You can't just go in and do the debris removal and ultimately move people back in. The other thing with Paradise, and I know there's other communities that have been as devastated, smaller communities around Paradise, is that there's not much to start with when it comes to the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is basically a total rebuild at this point. If you don't have the infrastructure and you move people back in, there's nothing to support them. That's not a good move either. So we have to be very calculated, and this is a team effort. It's neighbor helping neighbor all the way to the federal government. And so there are ongoing meetings with my staff and the mayors, the municipalities, and the state government to say, what is the logical sequence of events to be able to get a town like Paradise back on its feet? You got to focus on the infrastructure. You got to do debris removal. You've got to be able to understand the types of housing that are available. It's not just dragging FEMA travel trailers and manufactured homes in. We have to look at all options on the table and consider reasonable commuting distance. And in many cases, our individual assistance is also designed to provide some amount of aid for those that lost their job as a result of the community being devastated. So you've had, communities like Paradise are majority, made up of a majority of small businesses. Will they be able to come back? We have to have a real conversation with the private sector as to how we come back. The other thing that we have to look at is temporary school capability as well, temporary medical capabilities as well. So, this is going to be a very long and frustrating event for the citizens in Paradise, but we have all got to work together to find a new normal.
Brock,
Yes.
question to follow up on that. You mentioned a little earlier that the infrastructure was a main priority. The vice mayor of Paradise has said he's already been told by FEMA the road to recovery will take 5 to 6 years. People don't have that long to wait.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, right now, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is working with 700 open disasters. All these disasters take multiple years to get through. It's not that it's not that it's going to take 5 years to put people back in their homes, but if you're striving for a new normal, we got to figure out what some of these communities are working with the mayors. What is the goal and what is the vision for where they want to be as a result of going through this event in the future? And as I said earlier, it's a new normal. You're not going to be able to rebuild Paradise the way it was. And that type of planning, it takes calculated efforts of rebuilding the public infrastructure and deciding what schools get rebuilt or not, or what hospitals get rebuilt or not, based on what comes back into the community. So, our grant funding, FEMA thinks that we just come, a lot of people think that FEMA just comes in, provides food, water, shelter, and MREs. But largely, the bulk of our work takes place years after the fact. We are managing billions of dollars every day in multiple communities, and we'll be here for several years working this disaster.
Question for Governor Brown. Governor Michael Adams from ABC 10 in Sacramento. What's your understanding of the incident report that was taken by the Public Utilities Commission from PG&E that they had a line out or they had an incident near the start of the fire, and how does it relate to the fire?
We've got a wrap here shortly.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on issues that touch on liability. There's a process. There'll be a lot of people looking at it from an official point of view and also from citizen participation. So everything will be transparent, it'll all be aired out, but I think it would not be prudent for me to start offering commentary on difficult issues that we have a process to flesh out. What?
Rebuild Paradise, in Santa Rosa, the supplies, the labor, it's skyrocketed. People say they
Right.
can build the same home they had. Is there anything the state can do to prevent that from happening?
Well, we do have, as part of my executive order, we prohibit price gouging and things like that. But we are in the midst of a catastrophe, and catastrophes unfold over time, and the government is doing things. We can do more, but that's the nature of where we are today. That's why we call it a tragedy, and now we have to live with it. But I can tell you, the state of California will do everything we can, and where we find people gouging or acting improperly, we'll take action. The Attorney General will take action, the local prosecutors. But we still are faced with all the things you've heard today, and so we have to work it out as a human matter. We all have to work together. So the easiest thing is to try to identify one source of our problems and then kind of pick on that. I think it's much different than that. We are in the problem and we are the solution. So it's not going to be easy, but we'll get it done. We are not a poor state. We have the resources. We'll get it done.
Governor Brown, can you talk about PG&E's possible involvement as the
No,
cause?
I'm not going to talk about that. That's a legal matter that we have the most expensive lawyers in the world that will argue it out in exquisite detail. So I'm not going to add to it.
All right. Okay, that's going to conclude for today. Thank you very much for being here.